Here we are again, and we're going to talk about this and a little bit of that. What I mean by that is that this is a keyword in JavaScript you can think of as kind of like a dynamic variable you can't control. Its value changes based entirely on where you are in the code. Now, if you think about a story, John's dog Lucky loved to chase cars. He'd sit in the front yard surveying his kingdom. But when he heard a car approaching, he would spring into action, determined to catch his prey. This dog loved to chase cars, and this, in this instance, refers to a dog. Pretty straightforward stuff. However, if you have another little story, John likes a good hamburger in Cincinnati, that's Terry's Turf Club. Terry's has a great environment, a small menu done really well, and tasty French fries. This burger is the best burger in Cincinnati. And he's talking about this burger. This, in this little story, in this little narrative, is something entirely different. It depends upon its context. It depends upon where it is in the story. You can kind of think of this as a pronoun. If we have nouns that are variables that are thought of nouns, when they're attached to an object, they're a property. You've got functions that are kind of like verbs. When they're attached to an object, they're a method. This is kind of like a pronoun that points to an object. So if you have nouns and verbs and pronouns, in English you might have a tail wagging, or with an object that they're attached to, a dog's tail wagging. And you can substitute the whole kit and caboodle, dog, tail, wag, with a pronoun, this. Now, how do we do this? Literally. I'm going to use and lean on a tutorial that's online at this web address. Go see it, print it out, keep it bookmarked. It's a good place to do some investigation on JavaScript. So, the question is, what does this refer to in this function, do something? We have a function, we've defined it, named it, do something. In curly braces, we've put the code that belongs to that function. This.style.color equals, looks like $cc0000. What does this refer to? Interesting that you ask. Now in JavaScript, this always refers to the owner of the function we're executing, or rather to the object that the function is a method of. So when we define our faithful function do something in a page, its owner is the page, or rather the window object, that global object of JavaScript. Now an onClick property, though, is owned by the HTML element it belongs to. Small problem. We have this that belongs to the window, and yet it's supposed to belong to the onClick property. So if we execute do something without any more preparation, the this keyword refers to the window. Yikes. And the function tries to change the style.color of the window. Not gonna work. Since the window doesn't have a style object, the function fails miserably and produces JavaScript errors. So this, in this instance, doesn't point to an onClick. So if we want to use this to its full extent, we have to take care that the function that uses it is owned by the correct HTML element. In other words, we have to copy the function to do our onClick property. If you remember before, I said you can assign a function to an event, and that's one way of looking at it. Realistically, we're copying that function, which is why we don't use the parentheses, because the parentheses means run that function. So let's look at this just a little bit. The function, when you assign it with an equal sign to an event, the function is copied in its entirety to the onClick property, which now becomes, there we go, a method. So if the event handler is executed, this refers to the HTML element and its color is changed because the property does exist. kind of looks like this graphically. You have this, which points to the HTML element because it's copied the function in. It's copied the function. Now the trick, of course, is that we can copy the function to several event handlers, and each time it will refer to the correct HTML element because it's a copy. You can have this refer to one HTML element or another HTML element because each copy is pointing to the correct parent or the correct element that it belongs to. Thus, you use this to the fullest extent, pun intended. Each time the function is called, this refers to the HTML element that is currently handling the event. The HTML element that owns the copy of do something. We're copying the function into the object and the event. So, let's say we want to use inline event registration. That doesn't actually copy the function. Instead, you're referring to it, and the difference is crucial. Because when you just say inline, at least, when you're putting your JavaScript inline with the element as an attribute, the onClick property does not contain the actual function, but merely a function call. See the parentheses? It's not a copy, it's actually calling the function. So it's going to point to the window. Yikes. So it says go to do something and execute it, and when we arrive at do something, the this keyword once again refers to that global window object, and the function returns an error message. If you want to use this for accessing the HTML element that is handling the event, you just have to make sure that the this keyword is actually written into the onClick property, or whatever event you're using. Only in that case does it refer to the HTML element that the event handler is registered to. Man. So the difference here is if you do element.onClick equal do something and say alert element.onClick, you get the function that's copied into it as a result in the alert. As you can see, this keyword is present in the onClick method. Therefore, it refers to the HTML element. But if you do an inline onClick equal do something parentheses and then do an alert, it's going to give you the name of the function. This is merely a reference to a function do something. This keyword is not present in the onClick method, so it doesn't even refer to the HTML element. So let's look at an example of copying. This is written into the onClick method in the following cases. Element.onClick equal do something. Element.add event listener. We'll be looking at this shortly. Element.add event listener, click, do something, false. Or element.onClick, and we're using an anonymous function. We'll get used to that pretty quickly. And element.onClick equal, if you're going to use it inline, use it with this inline as well. So it'll exist. Whew. Again, we're going to use the add event listener, which is a more modern way of doing it. And we'll also be using the anonymous function an awful lot, especially when we get to jQuery. So when using an inline event registration, you can also send this to the function so that you can still use it. Yikes. It's a little bit more complicated than it has to be. Caveats. Well, you guessed it. Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer, at least until version 9, doesn't include the add event listener or the remove event listener. So you have to do some special tricks, and we'll cover that in a little bit. But just remember all the different event handlers that this can apply to when you're creating events and assigning them to objects and using the this keyword.